Well, I was first inspired by my father, who I grew up from a young age watching him play guitar, and so he only knew a few songs and a few chords, but I was absolutely enthralled when every time he would play for me. And so I said from a young age, I was like, when I grow up, I want to be able to do that, you know. And so I grew up in a Southern Baptist family, and so gospel music was always a part of it. Being in Mississippi, I grew up around blues music and country music, and so that was around all the time. And I basically was just kind of obsessed with the whole aspect of the art of music, you know. And so I started playing when I was about 9 years old, when my hands finally got big enough to make chords and stuff, you know. And so yeah, my father was my first influence with music. And then the reason that I started writing songs and playing harmonica as well was because of Bob Dylan. His songs, even at a young age, I could connect with him. I could connect with his lyrics, because he's not exactly the greatest singer in the world, he presented his art in such a way that it's like, oh, anybody can do it, anybody can write songs. And so he's the reason I started writing songs and playing harmonica, and from there, then I got into all kinds of other music and artists that inspired me. And so, but it started with my father.
So growing up, did you have a normal childhood, so to speak?
I was kind of a weird kid growing up. I was a nerd, you know, I was into all kinds of different things. But I did have a normal childhood. My parents made a very fortunate upbringing for me, so I owe a lot to them for that. But I would say it was fairly normal. Everybody has their hardships growing up or what have you, but I was in no way oppressed or, you know, in any kind of bad situation growing up. So had a good upbringing, and I owe that to my folks. But
That's great. That's great. When you were growing up, did you ever experience prolonged sadness? And if so, do you know the reason or the cause? What were you observing?
I think the earliest and the worst that I felt would be a death in the family. It was my grandfather. I was 12 years old. My role model, my best friend, my neighbor, you know, like I spent so much time with him, and it was my first experience with death or loss, and that was the saddest time. And I mean, no, that was 19 years ago. I still miss him, and I still grieve his loss, and I only knew him for 10, 12 years. So that was my first really sad experience.
Yeah, and I heard it in your songs, the first track. Right?
Yeah, Grandpa Was a Redneck. It was about my grandfather, and it was just a story bringing him back to life that I wrote, 20 years after his death. So
Yeah.
almost anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it wasn't about his death. It was more of a celebration of his life to try, And that song is about my home and my farm, my family farm. 3 generations now growing up on it, and it was a celebration of his life and his legacy and how he provided for generations to come before him. But I didn't dwell on the sadness of it. I'd use it as a celebration, So.
Grandpa was a redneck, raised by a country boy, buried in his overalls and buried in just the same. He was a poor boy, chunk of land and a good wife, trying just to get by was the hardest part of life. He said, I'm gonna work at fence line until I die.
About just him being satisfied with life, being grateful for the things he had, and just bring together people.
Yeah, and when he when he got our piece of land that our family farm is on, he borrowed the money from his preacher, and then there was nothing on the property. He built a house by hand, and then there were 2 lakes on the property, and so he would go and seine minnows, and he would go in the hollers and dig up worms, and he opened up a bait shop. So he basically financed the land and created a bait shop just by working off of the land that he was given the money to buy. And he raised his family on that, and 2 more generations since have been living on that property. So.
Wow, it's really powerful.
Thank you.
Where in the album also represents a type of love and loss for you?
As far as my latest record, let's see here. All right, the song "Sad Songs" at Happy Hour. That one is. There's a line that says, "I've been thinking about people I can't call," and so the loss and drinking from a glass of Maltol. So another way to you have a drink for them even though they're not with you anymore, and so that one is another relation to death, but it's about turning around that feeling from sadness and loss to just happy that you had that time with them, because in the chorus it says there'll be days like this where we all join hands and we all sing sad songs at happy hour.
Lord, I'm feeling weak. I lost a nerve. I had to speak. I lost another friend in the world's confusion. That's one more that won't make the reunion. I feel I'm stuck in Frazier Valley, writing songs about the mountains, while the sweetest of us are dying, all but the rest of us are trying. But if the waters keep rising, hard times beating down the door, there'll be days like this where we all join hands and we'll all sing sad songs at happy hour.
So it's about being happy that you had that time with them, and not dwelling on the fact that they're gone. So.
Wow. Does this also include people in your life that is still around yet you can't talk to them?
No, that one was just about the loss through death. So through the death of a friend or several friends, because at the time I wrote that song, I had lost 3 friends within a couple of months, and so I had to take all of that depression and sadness and loss, and I had to turn it around and put it into a song, and it was like an ode to them, because I could have told them everything that I felt while they were still alive, but I didn't tell them everything. They might have. I know that we were friends and we were all, we were tight and stuff, but I felt like I owed it to them to give them another song, and there's another song that I'm putting on my next record that is called Heaven Needed a Cowboy, and it's about my friend that I grew up with, riding horses and playing music with, and he was on the family farm near my farm down in Mississippi, and just riding his horse, and a storm blew up and he got struck by lightning on his horse, and it took him and his horse, right there on the spot. And so that was another one. The next day after I found out he was gone, I wrote a song about him, told his story, put his beautiful aura into a song, so to celebrate him, and that's how I translated that sadness into a song that, and it's such a sad song that, people that don't even know him, they cry at the song, but I conveyed the celebration of his life through a song, and also, the sadness and loss of him, so.
Yeah, it's a very powerful way to both honor and transform, the emotions and the person you love. Is there ever a moment in your life, or maybe when you first started writing music, where you were frustrated, like you couldn't get it out? Were there moments where like you were stuck? And if so, what helped you get unstuck?
Yeah, I would say I wasn't satisfied with the first few songs I wrote. I knew that I wasn't good at it at first. I wasn't writing songs that were up to par for me, and so I told myself I needed to get better as a writer and a musician and separate the two. So I began writing strictly poetry and strictly playing music for the melodic release, to just play, to have fun with melodies and stumble on new chords and new progressions and stuff. But I started just writing poetry, and I have a whole book when I was like, 10, 12 years old of writing just poems. And then later down the road, I'd say it took me just a few years of doing that, I was able to look at my poetry and look at the melodies that I was writing, and then put them together in a better sense since I was more experienced with both. And to this day, 20 years later, I still write poetry first, and then I put melody to my poems to make them songs. I'll find one stanza, I'm like, that's a really good chorus, that's a good hook line, that's a good spot to put a chorus, and then I'll embellish with the verses and with the bridge and all of that. But all of my songs, since I've been writing what I call good songs, has been a poem first, something that means something to words for me, and then find a melody that matches it, because poetry inherently has rhythm and meter, and it doesn't have to rhyme, but most of mine do. And so the rhythm and meter is there, so the spaces for the notes are already there, so you can add if I find it easier to add melody to a rhythmic assortment of words, as opposed to being like, oh, this is a great riff, on my guitar or whatever, and then I'll put words over it. So I'd rather start with something that's meaningful lyrically, because everyone can connect and relate to lyrics. Not everyone has the same taste for melody. So.
Wow, that's powerful. It's a very discerning revelation you have about music and its impact on people, I also like what you said about, it also sounds, you're welcome. It also sounds to me that initially you were just doing it for fun, but you really aspire to go professional. So you took the time to really go through the grind, the discipline, by separating two skill sets and repeating it over and over and over again, and just marinating in that process.
It did. It took me a long time before I got to the point where I was writing the songs that I thought were good enough to publish and make records, and it took me a good 10 years to do that. And but once I found my certain way of going about things, then I had the confidence to move forward with it, as opposed to just freelancing from the beginning. And I wanted to fine-tune my process that works for me, and then move forward with it. So.
Yeah. In a way, my filmmaking's the same. It's like I just keep going over and over again. My first iterations were not so good. It's still at, I would call it an amateur level, but I'm getting better at editing and putting things together, compositing. I realize it's a whole nother discipline. So I'm glad you're illustrating that. So
I know how it is.
So were there moments where there was a line in one of your songs? I pictured you in a bar singing to nobody, and I'm wondering, were there moments in your life that you know you're a good artist? I know you're a good artist. Do you ever get frustrated at like what success would look like, and how how there may or may not be a disconnect between where you are now and where you want to be?
In no way am I seeking fame or fortune, because I've already found happiness through making a living doing what I love, and to me that is success. Even though it might not be the most lucrative industry to be in, since music is a very tough industry, but that amount of fame and success that like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones have attained, that's awesome. That's once in a lifetime, one in a million kind of opportunities. But also things have changed in the music industry because when the Beatles went on TV, there was only 3 channels on TV, so the world had to watch, and so even though they were great, they were right place, right time. That amount of success is even more unattainable these days, and I'm not looking to play larger venues or sell millions of records, but I know that every time that I play a gig in every dive bar and every little country and blues bar or every place that I play, I make someone's day a little bit better, and that to me is the most rewarding thing about playing music, because if I was in it for the money, I wouldn't be in it because there's not much money. So it's rewarding to know that you look out and you see a few people smiling every time you play. You're touching somebody's life in a positive way, and that is the biggest reward, because I get to do it 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week. I get to make someone's day a little bit better.
Is there anything in there that has to do with your love for the people you impact?
Well, I think that the way my grandfather told me from a young age, he said, you can't please everybody, so don't try. And if you try to take that responsibility on yourself to please a bigger and a bigger audience as your career grows, you can do it for the people, but don't let it all be about the people. Let it be, it's not all about the fans. It's about expressing something, and if people can relate to it, great, but it's not your responsibility to expect that reception from everyone. So I would say just keep having fun with it and keep writing, keep doing what you love to do, and if it remains relatable and your audience grows, that's great, but that's not your responsibility.
That's powerful. You're giving me advice. Okay, so let's talk about relationships, like achy breaky heart type of relationships. Have you ever gotten your heart broken? Like, did you recall your first major heartbreak?
I definitely can, yeah. And as far as relationships go, I would say my favorite saying about relationships is compatibility is one thing, but timing is everything. Because if you're both not in the same state of mind to actually be in a relationship together, you might be 100% compatible, but if you're not in the right mindset at the same time, then it's not going to work, and that is unfortunate, because you might love somebody but they don't fit into your life, or maybe you don't fit into their life. And one of the most heartbreaking relationships for me was not when I had my heart broken, but when I broke someone else's heart. and it was because the timing was not there. I was dating someone, I was living in a different state, and I wanted to move to Colorado. And she did not. She liked her life and she liked her job, and I had to leave her to move to Colorado, and it hurt me just as much as it did her, if not more. And even though I loved her, the timing was wrong. So I had to move to Colorado, and I'm very glad that I did, but it was hard making a move, trying to do something new and leaving somebody behind that you love, you know. So that was one of the worst that I went through. So
Love and loss, huh? That's a category.
let me think here. I'll try to get through as much of it as I can. Yeah, but it's been a while since I played this.
What's it called?
What's that?
What's it called?
It's called Just Another Angel. Was a good girl in her own world. She was careless, fancy free, but she could not see the storm and brew. On a cold day she met me, and I can see straight through the bottom of this glass. All my trouble, all my candles past. I can't remember it all. Sorry.
That's
It's
okay.
been a long time since I played
That's a
that.
good start.
That was beautiful.
That started
It really is.
But I was cold, still water. Should have met her and got her. Do a favor just to save her. Trying to drain from the bottom of my well. She's just another angel. I truly believe. She was a southern belle, any boy could tell. She could make a man a wife. I still can't remember all my own lyrics, I'm sure.
What are some of the reasons why you have to let a woman you love go? Is it so that she can find love without you while you're gone?
No, for me it was about location, and I needed new things, new stuff. I wasn't ready to settle down and have a career and a white picket fence and start a family, and she was, but I wasn't, and I had to leave. So you know, she great woman, you know, would have been a great wife, what have you, but it was the wrong time for me. And that has happened to me a couple of times, but you know, that's, like I said, timing is everything. Even though compatibility is, you know, you can find compatibility, but the timing has to be right on. You know?
I hear that there's a wanderlust. Is that have you heard of the word wanderlust?
I've heard of it. Just the desire to roam.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hear maybe the soul of who you are is out there to explore, to wander, to experience different parts of life. What are your So I heard that you do hunting, you're in the outback. I mean, Colorado is pretty rugged here, especially in Frazier.
Yeah.
Coldest
place in the nation. Yeah.
Right.
Indeed.
Why Frazier? Why the coldest place? What is it about the frozenness of time and location that draws to your soul?
I don't know if the cold has much to do with it, but the reason I picked Frazier and Winter Park is because I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, and I really enjoyed the sense of community that everybody is there to help each other out because they're all friends, neighbors, small community, small town. So everybody helps each other out when they need it. One neighbor might not be able to provide this for one neighbor, but the other neighbor can. And then there's just a lot of give and take, and it creates camaraderie and companionship. And when I moved to Colorado, I was playing all over Colorado and southern Wyoming and playing in all of the mountain towns because there's a lot of gigs available and stuff. And of all the mountain towns that I was playing in, I found that Winter Park had the best communal, small town feel where everybody's helping each other out. Friends are there for friends, and hard times come up, and then everybody gets together for one individual in the community and helps them. And that sense of community is hard to find. I didn't feel it when I was living in Boulder. I didn't feel it when I was living in Golden next to Denver, And of all the mountain towns that I was playing in, this town was the most accepting, and I found the most good people and such great friends, and everybody helps each other out. And so when I found that sense of community, I moved up here right away. And it made me want to get more involved in the community as well. That's why I joined the fire department here in town, and I'm a volunteer firefighter. And I love playing the music gigs and stuff because I get to meet more people as they're the transient tourists and stuff that come in and out of town, but also, I still see the same friendly faces at all of my gigs that come out to see me play, and we get to hang out and stuff, and also so many common interests. There's world class trout fishing here in the valley. Everyone loves to snowboard and ski and ride, and so there's always somebody hanging out at your favorite spot doing your favorite activity that you can join in with, And so that to me is just, you can't find that in very many places in the world,
Wow, you're selling me. I'm looking at condos.
Nice. Yeah, you should be. You'd be good. You'd be a great addition to the valley.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so what are your musical who inspired you? What artists have shaped the way you do music? You mentioned Bob Dylan. Anybody else?
Bob Dylan was one of the earliest influences. And I've always listened to antiquitous music, the oldest music, seems to connect with me the most. And so I consider myself a country and blues artist. And so in country, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, the guys that wrote the saddest country songs, the most outlaw country songs, those were the artists that inspired me to do that lyrically, and the melodies come into play as well. I love the simplicity, but how good it is at the same time. And Willie Nelson said, a good country song is just three chords and the truth, and so that for country music is the reason that I play is basically because of those four guys. Now, I love a lot of other country artists, but those four guys do it for me. And then growing up in Mississippi, the birthplace of the blues and rock and roll, and I was listening to songs that were 100 years old when I was 10 years old, So they're old, but they're still relative, and they still convey convey emotions that people can relate to these days. And most people think of country and blues as sad genres, you know, but I believe that the reason that people can relate to it is because people think of happiness and sadness as two different ends of the spectrum, as opposite emotions, but they actually have the same magnitude, which means that you can listen to a song that is so sad that it actually makes you feel happy, hence the blues, you know? So they have the same magnitude, so that stretch of emotion, whether it pulls your heart one way or the other, it still invokes emotion in you, and it's relatable. And the simplicity makes it even more relatable for the country and the blues aspect on both ends, because you know, most country songs are about losing your horse or your dog or your woman, you know, like, you know, so, and blues is not far off, you know, from that. So I think that people can relate to the sadness in such a way that you can go to a bar and listen to a blues band play sad songs all night, but you're grooving, you're smiling, you're enjoying it, you know. So I believe it's because it evokes the same magnitude of emotion, whether it's on one end of the spectrum or the other. So that's why I think it's so relatable.
Well, thank you. This is over 15 for sure, but I'm so immersed in what you have to say. Last question, where do you see yourself in 5 years and then 10 years?
Right here doing the same thing, because I am happy as I can be right here. I like playing music for a living. I like my friends. I like my circle. I like the changing of activities in the seasons, trout fishing in the summer, hiking, biking, and then snowboarding, snowshoeing, and that kind of stuff in the winter. I don't really want to change anything. So 5-10 years, I should be right here doing the same thing. However, I do like to travel, so I will be traveling more. I hope to have hit a lot more countries by the time, you know, by 5 or 10 years from now. So that is.
What kind of countries do you want to go?
Well, I've been to South America, so next on my list is definitely Europe, Scotland, Ireland, Britain, Italy, France, Germany. But I'd also like to go to some of the countries that I've never even thought about going, like Eastern Europe and stuff. Don't know if I want to go to Africa or anything like that. Like, I'd rather go and see the culture that is so old, you know, like just the different types of architecture, the different cultural boundaries that are, you know, that are blurred. Having never been there, you don't see and feel how people have been brought up to believe in different things, or to you know, just the way they go about life in general. So I like seeing it because it teaches me more about, I mean, the world around me, but also learn more about where I come from and why I believe what I believe, you know. And so I'm looking forward to traveling and getting new perspectives.
And what's your definition of love?
Love?
Yeah.
Combination of bliss and terror. Sublime.
Well said. Very Hemingway.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Southern belle, any boy could tell